I wanted to cover in this podcast tools. There are a lot of tools, and there are so many more tools than there used to be in terms of doing this business acquisition process. First of all, just understand that you can't do it alone. And by the nature of what we're doing, we're acquiring businesses, right? So when you acquire a business, you have employees, which, if nothing else, should show you, yes, I can't do all this alone. But in the beginning, most people start alone. It's just them and an idea. But eventually, they realize again that teams get things done. So they build a board of directors, they get professionals, they talk to financial institutions that are willing to do their deals, and they begin to outreach to potential prospects. But there are so many more tools today than, for instance, when I started back in the 90s. I met my mentor in 1993 for this, and I didn't get my first email until 1995. I know that is hard to believe today, that there was a time when we didn't have an email, but there was, and there wasn't an internet essentially. That was again for me in 1995. But you have so many more tools today, and those make it so much easier in a lot of ways than it was back then when we referred to going through this process as shoe leather. Why? Well, you didn't have an ability to do a Zoom call. You set up an appointment, you traveled to that appointment, you sat down and met with that law firm, accounting firm, board member, etc. And it was much, much more inefficient back then. Did it work? Yeah. But today it's so much easier. So think about the tools that you have. First of all, the internet. And I could go on for hours about what the internet has done in this process. But just think about the ability to get lists, prospect lists, go through and look at law firms, accounting firms, the profiles of potential board members. You can get all that on the internet, where before that was just word of mouth, who knew who, and eventually to contact people. It's really hard for me to even think about how would you get in touch with law firms? How would you know which law firms did what, or accounting firms, without the internet? So just take a second to think about that. Desktop publishing. Yes, there were computers in the early days, but there wasn't anything like what you have today. So when you, for instance, did an executive summary, most of the time it was just words on a piece of paper. No email. Again, I got my first email in 1995. Think about how you would contact people without email today. Zoom calls, which really took off during the pandemic to a whole nother level. But again, you used to travel, sit down, and meet, where today you set up a Zoom call and you can interview 4, 5, 6 law firms in an afternoon. Different day. And you even have things like Hubstaff, which will let you track your time. So think about those. Think about what tools are out there. On the people side, you have now, and I put out a master class on this, outsourcing, onlinejobs.ph. You can end up with virtual assistants that, because of the tools you have on the internet, you can now interact with that person. They can do work much, much more effectively than they once could, when you had to have a live body in front of you. There wasn't an internet, as we've talked about. And then lastly, and this is reasonably new, things like ChatGPT. You're writing letters, you're writing emails. The ability to use something like that, put your letters and emails in and see what it does to improve it. Remember, it's a tool, it's not a person. So go through and look at it, see if it makes sense, and edit it. But in terms of starting to have a piece of paper with something on it that you can edit, it's a great tool, or to improve something. So those are the ones that come to mind. There, as I said, are a myriad more of them. But think about the tools that are there. One of the most important things with respect to tools, they just sit there unless you use them. So think about how you can take a look at your process, the things that take you the most time, and potentially the tools that you could use to improve the process. We've talked about the book, The Goal, which is about removing bottlenecks, and that's exactly what that is. So if you do not know the steps, go over to brucewhipple.com and grab the all-new Deep Dive Bootcamp. If you don't know how to outsource to onlinejobs.ph, there's a master class on that there. Again, those are tools, the knowledge that you need to be able to do this. Can you find that in other places? Sure, you can. But someone, myself, has spent the time to put those in a reasonably concise manner so that you don't have to go search. Again, look at me essentially as a tool as well. What can you learn from me that you can apply? So I wanted to take some time to talk about that and to have you think about all the tools that are out there, which ones can benefit you, and then how you can use those most effectively.